How wide is too wide? That's what I think you've got to ask yourself if you plan on going wider than 20 millimeters. Because, by the way, that's what all of these shots were. This is 14 millimeters from a new Viltrox lens, and yeah, I'm asking myself that question. How wide is too wide? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris Hagan, a video producer and photographer in Portland, Oregon, and there are some new ultra-wide lenses on the block for the Sony E-mount. One is a 14mm f4 full frame lens. The other is a 9mm f2.8 APS-C lens. I'll do the math for you. It's essentially the same lens across both formats. A 9mm f2.8 lens translates to about 14mm and f4 in full frame terms. Viltrox sent these to me to test out and review, and we're gonna do that on the Sony a7 IV. So as you can see, both lenses are super compact as part of their Air series, and both feel like air on the camera. Sorry, had to. The reason they're so light is because they follow a similar design to what we've seen from a lot of lenses in this budget category. Viltrox and a few other third-party lens makers have been able to save on size by sticking to the basics. No aperture ring, no switches or buttons, just lens, focus ring, and lens hood, which in this case comes out to about 170 grams. Putting the full-frame E-mount version side by side with the 20mm f1.8G lens, a small-ish lens itself by full-frame standards, there's still a noticeable size difference, and certainly holding the camera, you feel that difference. Still, inside the full-frame 14mm lens are 7 aperture blades and 12 lens elements in 9 groups. The APS-C copy has 13 elements in 11 groups. The exterior, very much plastic. That's another part of keeping the weight down, and it's not weather sealed. I mentioned both of those things, but there are plenty of lenses, especially third-party or adapted lenses, that get used every day without weather sealing, without any issues. I also generally don't find a plastic construction to be anything to hold against a lens either, especially if it's intended to be a budget option and it's comfortable to carry. To me, it's how it performs and what you can use it for that matter the most. So in that case, we start with the elephant in the room, the 14mm focal length, which, if you've never used one, takes some getting used to. The widest prime lens I've owned up until this point is 20mm, and when it comes to the wide end of focal lengths, every millimeter matters. Going from 24 to 20 is big, going from 20 to 14 is huge. I did a long-term review of Sony's 20mm f1.8 a few months ago, and a number of people were asking about how that compared to Sony's newer 16mm. And my response to that was always, if you're gonna buy a first-party ultra-wide lens north of $800, you should have a defined use for it. Otherwise, it'll be the most expensive paperweight you've ever owned. But these from Viltrox, which obviously are not meant to compete with the faster 1.8 glass, create space for someone to pick up an ultra-wide lens, even if it's not gonna be heavily used because of the $200 price tag. If you've got to commute, walking or riding through a downtown area, this is going to be super fun. I took it to Powell's City of Books, the world's largest independent new and used bookstore, by the way, which takes up an entire city block in downtown Portland, and I had fun with 14mm because of how different it is. I was capturing entire corners and city blocks, and especially once I got the photos home and into Lightroom, I really appreciated how much of a departure they were from everything else I've shot recently. I try to direct the viewer's eye sometimes and use masks and the composition to draw your eye into one part of the image, but with some of these, I kind of felt like it should just be viewer's choice. If it's a photo with a lot going on, what stands out to you? Also, speaking of Powell's Bookstore, shout out to the Gilder Coffee Company shop there. I'd never been, and the breakfast sandwich I had was one of the best I've had in my entire life. Easily top 5, probably top 3. It's also pretty photogenic with this Viltrox 14mm lens, but we'll talk more about that feature in a second. Now, if you're not downtown or near some taller buildings or active city blocks, you may have to work a little bit harder to make some compelling images in terms of street photography, and that has more to do with the focal length than this lens. Focusing with this Viltrox 14mm and 9mm APS-C lens, as you would expect on a body like the a7 IV, is quick and quiet and accurate. At 14mm, You'd always be pretty hard pressed to isolate your subject with aperture alone, but at f4, just forget about it. Put that out of your mind unless you're like a foot or less away. Instead, lean into filling your frame with the subject. Look at lighting and how color may make your subject stand out from the background. This is where that extra work comes in. You'll need to get closer. You'll need to pay attention to everything that's in the frame, and there is a lot in the frame. But doing that kind of composition hunting, to me, is a lot of fun and great practice for training the eye. The secret sauce, however, is in the close focusing distance, which I love. As much as I enjoy stepping back and trying to find a wide composition with wide-angle lenses, I'm always interested in how close I can get to the subject, which is just as fun. At 14mm, even at f4, you can create a different type of subject separation by leaning into what ultra-wide-angle lenses do best, accentuating what's front and center while pushing everything else back. So, pardon the flower photo cliche, it just serves as a really good example here. The minimum focusing distance on both copies of the lens is technically 13 centimeters, but I feel like I was even closer. And as I kept getting closer and closer, trying to hit the closest point I could, I was just really impressed. My point is, with a lens like this, you gotta go with its strengths, because what you're not gonna do is force it to be anything other than what it is. It's certainly not gonna be a portrait lens. It's gonna be kinda hard to use as an everyday and everywhere lens like a 28 or 35mm prime, but it can be really fun in its own way. Now, before taking a closer look at a few raw and edited photos, I'll say 14mm is also going to be a great vlog lens for a lot of reasons. It's more than wide enough to get yourself in the frame and then some, which is nice if you want to show off your environment as well. The weight is also going to be a big benefit if you're doing the walk and talk thing, because it's not going to make your shoulder fall off because it's not a heavy lens. And actually, let's show you what I mean in terms of that vlogging view. So camera's on the desk right now, and it is about a full arm's length away from me right now. So this is about what I would be able to get if I were vlogging. Probably be a little bit more comfortable if it were closer, but what do you guys think? I'm sure you're seeing the mess on this side of my desk. That's what 14mm gets you. Is it too wide? I don't know. You be the judge. But while we're here, let's also take a look at some of these photos in Lightroom to check out some of the lens optics. So the first thing I want to look at here is how it handles shooting a sunstar, for example. And I like that a lot. I think it's a nice defined shape. Looks good to me. But what I also want to point out is the ghosting, or really a lack thereof. I mean, you get a little bit here, but otherwise, I think it handles that really well. You probably noticed this flare on the right side, but I think it looks awesome. This is like Thor coming to Wakanda in Infinity War flare. It's a blast of a full rainbow. I think it looks really cool. I don't have an issue with this. I'm generally not shooting directly into the sun, but if you are, I don't know. I think it gives it a cool character, and it's something fun for your images. This photo in particular, all I did was raise the exposure and bring down the highlights, bring up the shadows a little bit, just to kind of balance out the image so you can see. Shout out to the A7 IV and its dynamic range, because this is the original, and this is what I was able to pull out of it. And then with my edit with color, obviously things get a whole lot more fun in terms of, you know, the color and a little bit of film grain, and it just punches up this rainbow effect even more. Big fan of that. So while we're here in Lightroom, we can also check out some of the close-up shots. I didn't shoot any test charts for this lens, and that's not really my thing on this channel anyway, but I do think with some of these close-ups, you can see just what the lens is really capable of. So we're gonna start with this flower, and this is my edit, so let me just turn that off. But this is a raw photo. This is an orange flower. Obviously, I think the bokeh in the background gets a little bit messy here, but I don't really care about that on a budget lens. I don't know if that's your thing or not. Ideally, the viewer's eye is just drawn in where you want it, and that's boom to this flower, which I think is very, very crisp and pretty detailed, and this lens does a great job of bringing that out. I'll put the edit back on. That adds a little bit more pop, and certainly at this point, like, do you care about the messy bokeh? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Let's look at Couple more examples. This purple flower looks like a good one. Yes, again, that's with the edit, but we can turn that off. And I mean, this is pretty close up. There's a bug in here. This dude was just waiting to jump out at me. This is a pretty good looking image from a $200 14mm lens. Things get pretty nutty around the edges. I don't know if that's a 14mm thing, if that's a budget lens thing. You guys can tell me if you regularly shoot with lenses this wide and get some stuff really close up, but I have no issue with it. And again, once you put the color back on, it pops, it looks good. I am a fan of using this lens for this purpose. Just a couple more real quick to show you a little bit more of what this thing does with details. This white flower, again, let me turn the edit off, but this is a raw photo. You can see a lot of details in these white petals here. I think it rendered this really well. In this particular photo, there's a little bit of fringing that you can see here along the edges of some parts of the flower, but I think that was handled pretty well, all things considered. Like, that looks really good. I will say I noticed it a little more on this photo, I think it was. Let me turn off the edit. I mean, here there's a little purple fringing here that's, I mean, we're pixel peeping. We're at 200%. That's crazy. Turn the color back on, or turn the edit back on, and like, this is what you got. I think this lens is doing an outstanding job, and I'm a big fan of the results that I got shooting with it. And let's just do one more real quick to show you what I mean when I'm talking about the bokeh in the background. So we've got this red flower, that's obviously the focal point. You look over here and these bokeh circles are more like octagons, hexagons, not the best with geometry. Does that bother you? It doesn't really bother me. If you pull up this photo and you see this red flower jumping out at you, and the first thing you think to do is to zoom in to the right side of the image to this out of focus blob of a tree, that's up to you. Me, I'm looking at this flower and I'm like, wow, this is a crisp image of a flower. Let me turn off the edit. This is, you know, the raw photo here. I think this is really sharp. I think it looks pretty good. I think it's very detailed. Again, little bit of purple fringing maybe there. We're at 200%. This is ridiculous. It's a good photo. This lens does a good job. It's $200. So who is this lens for? I think it can be for a lot more people at $200 because you can add it to your kit and save it for special occasions without feeling guilty for spending a ton of money on it. Fun angles for music videos, especially in tight quarters like cars? Check. Real estate video, where you may want a light lens that's easy to balance on your gimbal? Check. For the parents of toddlers chasing them around with a wide angle lens because it's just fun? Check. Day in the life creators. Wide angles are great for first person shooting. I can shoot from my chest and get my feet in some shots. It's wild how wide 14mm really is. The main con with this lens in particular is probably just that f4 aperture. Most of what I shot was with plenty of daylight, so minus a few shots inside of Powell's, I didn't need to bump my ISO up too much. But if you are going to be shooting in low light a lot, just be prepared. The first thing that comes to mind would be if you're using it to get a really wide shot at a wedding reception or inside of a church during the ceremony. I'd like to have a faster lens in those moments to keep my ISO down as much as I can. Even shooting outdoors, once you get to sunset or a little beyond that, you'll start to feel the effects of an f4 lens. Otherwise, as far as the focal length and lens quality, I think this is a solid choice that can do a lot of things that others can't. My take, go wide or go super close. That's where this thing is gonna really be different. Most photos in between ultra wide and close up will just be best handled with different focal lengths. And like I said before, the main thing here is having this lens available at this price point while still delivering quality optics. There are more creators than ever making content across every field imaginable. This lens is gonna be a great tool for those who need it because there really aren't many primes that are this wide around. You just need to ask yourself, is 14mm too wide? As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'd love to know what y'all use ultra wide lenses for, or if I'm missing anything with how I use it. I'm out shooting just about every day for one reason or another, usually with a 35mm, so I think mixing in this 14 will be pretty fun. Holler if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.